Hello everybody, it's Gunnison and welcome back to Spinning the Tires. Several races to go over today with a eventful and interesting All-Star race and as well as the previous Sonoma points race in NASCAR's triumphant return to California from a couple weeks ago. We're also going to preview Nashville Superspeedway's return to NASCAR this weekend and look at a couple other breaking stories in NASCAR. So it's been a couple weeks since I've been on, so let's get right to catching up on all the NASCAR news. Alright, so first I'm going to catch up on race reviews. So a couple weeks ago, after the Coca-Cola 600 and the race where Kyle Larson won the race in very dominating fashion, winning all four stages, he went and did it again at Sonoma, winning 3 out of 3 stages in the race. Just incredible performance. He didn't lead every lap. Chase Elliott led some laps. I believe Martin Truex did as well. Several different leaders of that race. But Kyle Larson ultimately, I think, had just the best car around there. If it wasn't him, it was either Chase Elliott or Martin Truex, but he was just dominating all day. He's really shown himself to be the championship favorite the past few weeks, I think, because he's winning on every kind of track right now, excluding super speedways, but that's sort of a whole different animal. But the Sonoma race was good. There were several incidents happened during the race, one involving Anthony Alfredo, one pretty big wreck involving Corey LaJoie, Ross Chastain, and Kevin Harvick. Harvick, of course, must not have good memories of road course racing, because the last time we were at a road course at Circuit of the Americas before Sonoma, Harvick, of course, was involved in the big wreck on the backstretch there. So, but Sonoma, again, it's a road course like Circuit of the Americas, but it's very different. Just 11 corners. It's a little shorter, and it has more hills. So very conducive to exciting and interesting racing. There was also an incident in the final corner of the final lap that cost both Daniel Suarez and Michael McDowell positions in the top 10, unfortunately. So, yeah, that was unfortunate. Apparently it was payback Suarez had on McDowell after McDowell kind of moved wide in one of the turns. I think it may have been turn 4 or something like that, and sort of shoved Suarez off the track. So, Rubin's racing, I guess. So, yeah, that was a good race, though. Even though Larson won, which is considering, kind of the norm this year, kind of, oh, that was a boring race kind of thing. It was a pretty good race, I thought. Ricky Stenhouse actually at one point hit the wall on the front stretch really hard in the middle of the race. So, an incident-filled race to be sure. But yeah, it was good to see cars back on that track. Sonoma, of course, is one of the road courses that's routinely been on NASCAR's schedule for years, and good to see it back. I also want to note in that race there was a lot of interesting strategy going on. It seemed every restart had a different lineup, like drastically different. So people were, getting 4 tires, getting 2 tires, getting no tires, and ultimately the new tires paid off. But the restarts were very interesting with the people on old tires up front. Saw guys like Corey LaJoie get up there, and he was holding his own really well. He's kind of shown himself to be a good road course racer these past couple road course races, so he's doing good. Ross Chastain did well at points too. He's getting to be a really good road course racer too. I believe he finished in the top 10, so he's on an upswing at that kind of track for sure. Now let's review the All-Star race from this last week. It was back in Texas, but this time not at Circuit of the Americas. It was in Fort Worth's Texas Motor Speedway, and they ran that race the way they race it each year. They have the All-Star Open, 3 stages, which is all the drivers that didn't qualify for the All-Star race had a chance to race their way in. Ross Chastain and Tyler Reddick won the stages in that race. Eric Almirola won the race, and Matt DiBenedetto won the fan vote. So those 4 drivers all made the race from the All-Star Open. Now, next, of course, was the All-Star race, the big event. And a lot of fans were pretty skeptical going into this race because it had 6 different stages and a very complex system of field inverts. So at the end of each stage, they would kind of invert the starting order of the field, so completely new cast of characters up towards the front of the field at every restart. The stages, for the most part, were very short. A lot of the first ones were 15 laps. There were 4 of those, then there was a 30-lap stage, and then a 10-lap dash to the finish. And who won the race but Kyle Larson? He's just he's running a clinic lately. It's absolutely incredible just how dominant he's been, especially with the inverts going on in the field. You know, it was kind of going to be a game of who could get past all those and stay up at the front. Well, the answer was Kyle Larson. Now, I will say Brad Keselowski for Team Penske put up a good fight against him towards the end of the race, so kudos to him. It's like he said afterwards, they're just not beatable. He said even with the current package, you can't draft up to those Hendrick cars. They're just too good. And he said they had work to do to catch up to them. So Hendrick's really, really running well. Chase Elliott and William Byron all finished up there towards the top as well. So Hendrick Motorsports this is no fluke. These guys are on a roll. So pretty cool to see him win the All-Star race for the second time in the last two All-Star races he has competed in. Last time he won it, he actually won it after winning the Open. Before the night, he didn't even have a guaranteed spot in the All-Star race, but he went and won it and the $1 million. Now, speaking of the $1 million, the grand prize for the race was not handed out as it has usually been. So in the past, it would just be $1 million check to the winner of the All-Star race. This year, they did something kind of interesting, though, which kind of took away from the fun of it being a full $1 million, but also kind of produced a new interesting aspect, too. So years ago, NASCAR used to have a pit stop competition. I think it was on All-Star Weekend, and crews would compete for the best pit stop, and it would be like an indoor arena that they'd do it in. This year, they brought that back, and the prize for that was $100,000. The difference was they did the pit stop competition mid-race. That was pretty neat. I think the competition was just throughout stage 5 of the race, or as they call it, round 5. And Chase Elliott, his pit crew, wound up winning the $100,000. And the way that worked is they split the $1 million between the race winners $900,000, so that's as much as Larson won. And then the pit crew who won, they got $100,000. So the winner didn't quite get $1 million, but $900,000, still a pretty hefty payday for the driver of the number 5 car. So that was ultimately, I thought, a good race. Mike Joy in the Fox booth did a good job of explaining the race, simplifying it as a heat race. That's how he put it. That really, I think, simplified it for everybody pretty quickly. Just sort of small town short track style heats. Basically what it was, and then a dash to the finish. So overall, not a bad All-Star race. It was the first All-Star race that Texas has hosted it. It became the 4th track behind Charlotte, Atlanta, Bristol, which have all hosted it before. Atlanta held the first one, Bristol held it last year, and Charlotte held every race in between that. So be interesting to see if the All-Star race becomes a rotating event, which is kind of that's kind of what it's looking like, and I kind of like it. So it'd be cool if they ran it on a road course one year. I'd really think that would be cool. So yeah, so that does it for the race reviews. Now let's get into previewing what is in store for this next week in NASCAR, because there's a lot of interesting things going on. So this weekend marks the start of a few new things. First of all, NASCAR is switching its broadcasts for the middle of the season. Yes, we're already to the middle of it nearly. It's hard to believe, but NASCAR is switching from Fox to NBC, as is what happens every year. So that'll be the end of NASCAR on Fox's season. Overall, I'm going to rate their season a 7 out of 10. The introduction of Clint Boyer to the booth added a nice dose of humor that had been missed when Darrell Waltrip had left the booth in 2019. Now, the broadcast had gotten rather bland last year with just Mike Joy and Jeff Gordon. Seems there were a lot of awkward moments. This year was better on that. There was a little more fun in the booth, of course, with Clint Boyer. My only complaint would be, they made it a bit too much about the entertainment rather than the race. Sometimes Clint Boyer and Jeff Gordon were kind of putting on a bit of a show. They were in a humor contest, and it's like, guys, focus on the race. Now some of this viewpoint's been shaped after I listened to some other guys talk about it, and it kind of changed how I listened to the race. And I was like, yeah, they really aren't focusing on the racing as much as they maybe should have. I think they did a good job though. Clint Boyer, he knows his stuff. He just retired last year from NASCAR, so good addition to the booth. I think they just gotta, balance the humor and the analysis a little better, and if they do that, it'll be a perfect combination. But overall, their broadcasting was pretty good. They missed several wrecks. Um, and weren't able to get replays of them, so some people complain about that. Any camera crew can do that though, and sometimes it's inexcusable, other times there were good reasons. But overall, not a bad season. For the first time in a few years, though, I'm actually looking forward to NBC's part of the season more than Fox's, because I think they're going to try some new things out this year. They've been with the same broadcast format for about 4 to 5 years, 4 years, um, with Rick Allen as the play-by-play, and then analysts Steve Letarte, a crew chief, and then drivers Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Jeff Burton. I think maybe they should try some new stuff out. My idea, make Jeff Burton actually more of a off-the-track analyst like Jamie McMurray is for Fox. I think he'd do well in that position, and also that would reduce the booth to 3 people, kind of preventing them from stepping over each other, which is a problem from time to time. Also, I know Rick Allen is one of the most, you know, laughed at commentators in NASCAR, prone to some gaffes from time to time. I'm expecting to see a lot of improvement out of him this year. He's been getting better the past few years. I've had people, tell me he's looking, kind of sounds like a younger Mike Joy. So, excited to see what sort of energy and drama he can add to these races, which is something the Fox Sports booth was a little light on this year. So, looking for that excitement in the booth. Also, looking for less commercial breaks. Fox had a lot of commercials, especially in their big races like the Daytona 500 and the Coca-Cola 600 this year. So, NBC needs to make sure they're not losing viewers by making too many commercial breaks. So, they gotta watch for that. Now, the race they're coming in with is NASCAR's return to Nashville, Tennessee. NASCAR, of course, has been running a couple races in Tennessee each year at Bristol, but now the great state of Tennessee gets their 3rd race of the year, taking a Dover race off the schedule. So Nashville is a 1.3-mile concrete tri-oval. NASCAR has run here in the past before with what is now the Xfinity Series back in the early 2000s. There were some fun, chaotic, and exciting races there back in the day, so I expect to see more of the same now. They're using a high horsepower package for this race. I think lots of fans are very excited about that. Very excited to see the cars slipping around the slick concrete surface. So we'll see what happens this weekend. Drivers will be getting practice and qualifying because it is a new track, so that'll be much needed relief from the one-day show weekends we have. It seems almost every weekend now, so that is a very good thing. I expect to see a great race, and I say it each week. I say the previous race I think it was a good race, and I say for the next race I expect it to be a good race. But honestly, this season there haven't really been that many bad races. There have been average races, but nothing really bad. So until I see bad races, I really don't think I can really say I expect the next week's race to be bad, because this year is just as Fox advertised it. It's been one of the greatest seasons ever, in my opinion, especially with my guy Michael McDowell winning the Daytona 500. So, yeah, I just think Nashville is going to put on a great show this weekend. It's the Ally 400 in Music City this weekend, so pretty exciting. It's also fun as a country music fan to see Pryor and Lee, the country group, advertised on Corey LaJoie's car. So it's cool to see the Nashville music scene incorporated into all this as well. Yeah, now we got a couple interesting stories to go over that have been kind of taking the NASCAR community by storm, and there's a lot of speculation about these, so let's get right into these stories. Alright, so the couple of things I want to discuss today are very interesting stories that have been going around. The first one is the current ballot of Kurt Busch. Where will Kurt Busch go? Kurt Busch, his contract with Chip Ganassi Racing is apparently up at the end of this year, and he released a video earlier in the year that seemed to indicate he was retiring. Well, he released another video recently that indicated he was not. So in typical Kurt Busch fashion, a little bit confusing. But he's apparently here to stay, but it looks like next year he may be with a different team. Now, it's been rumored that 2311 Racing, Bubba Wallace's team, has approached Kurt Busch as a potential driver for their second car. Almost immediately after that, Trackhouse Racing, the other new NASCAR team, which currently fields Daniel Suarez's number 99, they are looking at opening a second team next year, and they apparently approached Kurt Busch about being their next driver. So, very interesting here. Who will he choose? I'm going to offer my take on this. I think Kurt Busch is going to go to Trackhouse Racing. Trackhouse is a Chevy team like he has now, so I suspect he might want to stay with that Chevy Chevy power, kind of what he's used to for the later years of his career. Also, it's looking like it's potential that they could introduce the number 97 for him, which would be kind of neat, because 97 was his number back when he won his championship in the early 2000s. Of course, the number doesn't have that much to do with it, but overall, I think Trackhouse is a little more of the environment that he would want. You know, the one thing I would say about that is if that happens, Daniel Suarez cannot compare his performance to Kurt Busch's. You know, if you keep thinking, you know, he's the high bar, I've got to meet that, you're going to keep pulling yourself down. Daniel Suarez next year, when he has a teammate, if he has one, with that second car, needs to focus on continuing the success he started this year when they're just a one-car team, because he's doing phenomenal. I think part of that is just being able to work on his own, in his own zone, kind of doing his own thing. The team, the crew can all kind of focus on Suarez, what that car needs. That's been very good for that Trackhouse team this year, so they can't draw away from that if they add a second car, so I'll just say that. But I would love to see Kurt Busch move in alongside Daniel Suarez, and I'll be interested to see in a few years, I'm assuming Kurt Busch will retire soon, in a few years when he does, who's going to take over that second Trackhouse ride. So it'll be interesting to see how things develop over the next few years. So who knows where he'll go. He could surprise us all and go to Rick Ware Racing and become a bottom of the field driver. No, that's not going to happen. So the other story that has popped up, and this one's a little older. It was kind of a headline about a month ago, but I want to discuss it because it's very interesting as a Colorado race fan. NASCAR has announced several new markets that they would like to target for NASCAR races in the future. Maybe not on next year's schedule, but in the 2023 or 24 schedules with the next gen car. They're looking at going to, first of all, Mexico City. Mexico is a market that hasn't been touched by NASCAR since the Busch Series, which is now the Xfinity Series, ran there in the early 2000s. And they do have a NASCAR following down there. They have a small NASCAR Peak Mexico Series. I've seen some of the clips. It's very good racing, actually. That's where Daniel Suarez got his start, actually. Other than that, not much of a NASCAR scene down there, but there are plenty of race fans. So I think if NASCAR went to Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City, which is the current Formula One track there, I think that would be a fantastic opportunity for them to reach that market. Now, the other market they're reportedly looking at targeting is the Pacific Northwest. And Pacific Northwest, I think this is a fairly easy answer. They should be looking at racing at Portland International Raceway, which has been the site of a lot of sports car races over the years. I think they should take a look at that. Maybe some other tracks in the area. I think there's some short tracks up in Washington, so consider the options. But I think Pacific Northwest is a region that, if NASCAR went there, that would be a pretty good option. And also, this is the big one. NASCAR is looking at going to Colorado, my home state, in Denver. I do not live in Denver. I'm about 6 hours away, but a street race in Denver, I'm going, hands down. There's no way I don't attend that because that would be the coolest thing ever. And yeah, that's what's being rumored. Them potentially building another street circuit. I've already actually drawn up a few different concepts for a racetrack that starts and finishes near the soccer field there, the Pepsi Center, and goes through parts downtown, over bridges over the Cherry Creek, as it's called, in Denver. So several different options for a course, but whatever course they go with, I'm guaranteed to love it. Just because NASCAR has never come to Colorado since they ran the trucks at Colorado National Speedway and Pikes Peak International Raceway back in the 90s. So it's a much needed return. I think I've seen a growing community. There are NASCAR fans here in Colorado, and we need an outlet. We need a track close to home. Circuit of the Americas, of course, which I went to, is one of the closest tracks to here. That's why I attended that, and it took 2 days to get there. So I think we'd all love a track closer to where we live. So same for race fans, somewhere like Utah, Wyoming, or even Nebraska. So a race in Denver would be a huge event. Pretty cool. So those are my thoughts on what is potentially coming with the new tracks in NASCAR. Also, got some big news for some short track fans out there. North Wilkesboro and Rockingham Speedway in North Carolina are both getting huge amounts of money from the North Carolina government as part of a COVID recovery plan. Rockingham Speedway still hosts some races from time to time, so the money put toward that may be enough to get it to the state where it can host NASCAR events for the first time since the early 2000s. But North Wilkesboro, it's going to require a little more maintenance, so it'll be interesting to see what exactly they do with that. But if they're able to restore it to its former glory as a half-mile short track with high banking, oh man, it'd just be a dream come true. So I'm very excited about that. NASCAR, for the first time in about 20 years, is actually taking a significant look at adding tracks to the schedule. This is fantastic. This direction we're going in, I think so. Very excited to see where it goes. So, yeah, I think that's about it for this week. A bit of a longer episode for sure, but next week we'll be reviewing Nashville and previewing another new track, Road America. So, looking forward to that. So, I will see you all next time. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. And yeah, have a great week, great weekend, and until then, I will see you next time on Spinning the Tires.